Diyala Province lies just northeast of Baghdad and has been one of the strongholds of al-Qaeda in Iraq. Freelance journalist Doug Grindle was recently embedded there with U.S. Army units. He accompanied the troops on several of their patrols in the rural areas of the province.
I wanted to go to Diyala Province because it's one of the last hotbeds of insurgent activity in Iraq. It's only really that and Mosul in the north near Turkey which have these problems on a reasonably large scale. al-Qaeda was for a long time in charge of Diyala Province. Baghdad city, which is the capital of Diyala, became known as the capital of the Islamic State of Iraq, which is sort of the terror concept of what Iraq could be. While I was in Diyala, I traveled down to the southern part of the province, just south of Baghdad. Now, down south, it's pretty rural. It used to be a huge producer of food and was known as the breadbasket of Baghdad. Well, now it's not like that anymore at all. Unfortunately, many of the fields that used to be so productive are all dried up. There's no irrigation. There's no electricity to run the generators that provide irrigation. And really, the people have been vastly depopulated. Al-Qaeda pushed a bunch of them out, and a bunch of them just plain left. In this part of southern Diyala Province, al-Qaeda has been reduced and dispersed, so there's really only remnants left. Out on the eastern edge of Diyala Province, out towards Iran, operations do continue, and there's some fighting that still needs to be done. But in this area, the real challenge now is to bring those people back and repopulate the place, and it's a massive effort of reconstruction that's necessary to bring it back to any semblance of normalcy. One of the places I went to is a village named Naqib. Now, al-Qaeda ran pretty much everyone there out of town. Al-Qaeda, in essence, turned this into a stronghold. They took over the local school, turned that into a major headquarters, and as we walked through the northern part of Naqib, we came to a compound that's pretty beat up. This had been a house used by al-Qaeda as a kill house. They bring people here they suspected being traitors, burn their cars, and after some torture, kill the people themselves. It's a pretty grim place, then and even now. When you look around Naqib, you actually see all these blown-up houses, and there's about 50 houses in the village, and there's really only a handful left standing. Al-Qaeda knew that the security forces at some point were going to come through and try and throw them out. So what they did was they just booby-trapped all of the houses, and they developed this thing called a house-borne IED, or a house-borne bomb. And so the Al-Qaeda would wire up all these booby traps. When the soldiers went inside, they just blow up. So after the soldiers, the Iraqis and the Americans went through clearing the town last year, they had a couple of casualties. So the soldiers said, well, to heck with that. We're just going to blow up every house here. And that's pretty much what they did. So when you see all these houses blown up, Al-Qaeda didn't do it directly. The soldiers had to do it, in essence, to so-called save the town.
Al-Qaeda had a big influence in this region, through terror. If you look around this area, this village is a good example of how they just ran the people out, because they just wanted to see, get that message, that we are Qaeda, this is what we can do to you if you don't help us. And that's what happened. A couple of months ago, we conducted an operation with the Iraqi army, and the operation consisted, clearing all the house-borne IEDs in the houses, and also the any IEDs or any explosives in the palm groves. These palm groves is the main source of income for these families. The main crop they produce out here is pomegranates, dates, oranges, and grapes. An average looking around $200,000, at an average village to make money. So that's what we're trying to work now after the operation, to get the people come back to the village, get them compensation so they can start and rebuild their village that was destroyed by insurgency.
As you go across the southern part of Diyala Province, really large areas are just depopulated. There's just no people there. And you talk to the soldiers and say, well, how many people still have to come back? And they say, well, really, it's in the early stages, and there's thousands and thousands of people that have to come back. But obviously they need a job. Well, it's all rural there, so it's all agriculture. And you need water so that you can actually grow something. And you need electricity so that you can have pumps that can push the water around so you can grow something. As well, the people that did remain were generally poor people that worked with al-Qaeda. And the returnees are not very pleased with these people, who are essentially, as they see it, cooperated with the enemy. So there are all these problems that are actually stopping people from sort of coming back. So it's a very, very slow process. The government's trying to improve things by, say, taking a certain amount of money and giving it to people who have had their houses destroyed. But it's still not going to happen anytime soon that the area becomes a lot more repopulated.
The Iraqi army was not here in 2007, and the United States Army was not in this area in 2007. They were really focused on securing Baghdad and the other population centers. And so, what we started seeing last year in 2008 was a much more competent, capable Iraqi army that had its legs under it. And, the Iraqi, a lot of the credit goes to the Iraqi army. They came in here and they've, taken over, established all kinds of checkpoints along the roads, and have just gotten out and been very active and put a lot of pressure on these guys. We just, of course, when we came in last September, we tied in with those guys and began partnering with them to try to achieve an even greater effect.
What's the situation al-Qaeda in your area?
They're still around. They're still present. A lot of these guys, this is home, and so they have some passive support. Their wives and their children still live in the area, so they will. We know they sneak back in to occasionally see family members. We get reports of that. They're very difficult to. Usually those reports are 2 or 3 days old when we get them, but yeah, there's still some passive support here, but certainly they're not willing to show themselves when they come in. They've got to be very careful when they come in here, because they know between us and the Iraqi army, they're going to get caught if they're not very, very careful.
The Americans like to say that the Iraqi army is a lot better today than it used to be even a couple of years ago, and for the most part that's true. All you have to do is look at the Iraqi soldiers and their vehicles, their equipment, even their motivation to go out patrol and even get in fights. It's night and day as what it used to be. It's much better than it was a few years ago. On the other hand, even the Americans say that the Iraqi supply lines aren't all that great, and their planning could really use some help too. Regardless, the Iraqis and the Americans get along personally pretty darn well.
Well, this is the fourth company headquarters, and we initially came to just hopefully do a quick link up and then go on to Mulaid, but it kind of turned out that they had some information that they wanted to pass. So our intel collection team is gathering that right now, and the Iraqis were hospitable enough to have us over for lunch. So it's actually a pretty frequent thing. They're very generous in that way. And,
what are you guys getting for lunch?
Well, I think this is a pretty standard lunch for the army, the Iraqi army. It's a really good rice and then some chicken on top of that, and then some sort of like potato soup type thing. But it's pretty good. And then this is the standard bread, hummus bread, which we all really like. So yeah, I think it's probably about standard lunch.
Alright. I don't like nobody playing with me and my food, so I'll stop that. Got a little soft spot for the cats, so trying to get them a little grub.
I like to eat, so I figured the cats like to eat too. Little tuna. You find the small things to relate it to home. You always remember where you're at, but you find the small things to make you feel like you're at home. I guess make the time pass.
How's your tour going anyway?
Everything's going well. We're doing good, working with the Iraqis. We've seen a lot of progress since we've been here. Slow, but it's progress. Anything's better than nothing.
After lunch, we went on patrol with the Iraqi army to the village of Mula'id, just to the north. The idea was to go up there and then walk back down south and just check and see if the hinterland is clear or really just what's going on. This whole area is really important. This village is right next to the Diyala River, which runs like a knife right through the center of Diyala Province. Al-Qaeda used to use this whole area as a transit point, both north and south, and also use this area to store weapons in caches. As the soldiers move across the countryside, they're actually walking across all of these abandoned fields that haven't been worked for years. Well, the soldiers are pretty relaxed as they go along, but they're looking out for any signs of insurgent activity, things like weapons caches, for instance. Well, they don't find any of those this day, but they do find these old abandoned shell casings from artillery shells. The soldiers say these are probably illumination rounds that were fired by the American forces months or even years ago, and they've just been lying out here ready to rust. The soldiers make sure they pick these things up, because if the insurgents come along and find an old artillery shell that's all hollowed out like this, then what they'll probably do is take that shell, fill it with explosives, set it next to a road and try and blow up the American or Iraqi security forces. So the soldiers make sure they pick these things up whenever they find them.
Maybe it was buried at one time in the rain or something. Washed some of the dirt off of it or something, I don't know.
Here in Mula'id, we've been here 2 days in a row now, and we found something each time. It's nothing too significant really, but we still like to take care of it properly.
All right. Let's go.
Well, this is the Diyala River. It's important for a couple reasons. Somewhere across here there may be some potential crossing sites that they use, but we also like to check out like the farmers' pumps and that sort of thing also, because this is their only source of irrigation water. So yeah, we try to make it a point to come down to the river wherever we can and check on the infrastructure that they've got. It's older pumps and older electric motors that power the pumps, but they generally work pretty well. But because of the fact that they're powered by electric motors, the electricity becomes really, really key.
Yep. You know what I mean? How do they get to the pumps? I'm gonna be scared in a minute. Is there pipes or something?
The next day we went on patrol, and we went to this village called Brahmi, which is smack dab right in the center of southern Diyala Province. Brahmi is one of those typical towns where al-Qaeda pretty much kicked everybody out. Now people are starting to come back slowly. The main reason is because this joint security center is there on the outskirts of town. The Americans are sprinkling about 20 of these security centers all across southern Diyala Province, and they're really, really important. They're staffed by the Iraqi army, as well as this group called the Sons of Iraq. The Sons of Iraq are this pro-government Sunni militia. Many of their members actually used to fight against the government, against the Americans, against the Iraqi army. Now they fight for the Americans, for the government, and for the Iraqi army. The simple reason is because they got sick of working with al-Qaeda. Al-Qaeda's really been terrible to these people, killed popular sheikhs, forced marriages upon girls, and really had all sorts of harsh, ultra-Islamic sort of behavior.
So it
was an IED on the right?
Yeah.
compared to the way this town was when we first got here, it's completely different. Like when we first came here, the IA were constantly telling us they thought AQI was running around in here. There was a couple old men and one young boy who'd just gotten out of jail that lived here, and that was pretty much it. The IA, they did a big clearing operation through here, us and our coalition forces and the Iraqi army, and they established the security center with checkpoints on the outskirts of the village. Once they did that, I mean, you know, we came here 1 week, there was no one. The next week, the security center was established, and 3 days later, you know, 100 people had moved into the village. So these security centers are real important in two aspects. One, they create confidence in the villagers. I mean, they make them feel safe, that there is a security presence. And two, or with that, creates jobs for them. That's something they really like. And then, and with that, it shows the government that this village is trusted by the Iraqi army, and so essential services can be pushed down.
What happens for the people coming to that? Do they have water to do agriculture? How does that work?
Well, my understanding, because I can only really speak for my platoon area, is water is a real problem throughout the entire area. And these guys move back, and the men are primarily employed by the security centers. Now, there's some that have skills, and they can find jobs in other towns. They just live in their old village. But most of them are employed by the security center. With water, both drinking and agricultural, it has been an issue, and it's a recurring issue. It's something that's always being brought up. The Iraqi army does make water supply drops to a lot of the villages. I know we'll kick off bottles of water whenever we come around, but as far as a nailed down solution to the water problem, that hasn't come about yet. And I know the provincial level is working on it, getting these canals refilled with water, digging deep wells. Once that problem's fixed, I think 90% of the problems in the province are going to be fixed.
Is al-Qaeda actually operating across your area?
In the platoon area, we haven't seen any type of evidence that would indicate recent activities by al-Qaeda. And we know they're not gone completely from the company area, but as far as where we normally operate, and we're pretty sure with the strong IA presence, the number of security centers have been built, that al-Qaeda, while they may not be dead in the area, they're certainly nowhere near as strong as they were.
How does that contrast with the situation when you arrived back in October?
When we first arrived, there was areas in the entire company area where people, even including the Iraqi army, just did not go. But through joint operations, with the help of the people here in the company area, we've managed to clear roads, repopulate villages, and it is a night and day difference.
It's really hard to overstate just how important the Sons of Iraq have been. They've really turned the security situation around and have been a major factor in making this part of Diyala Province a lot quieter than it used to be. The Americans have been paying the Sons of Iraq for the last year or two, and that's going to continue for a little bit, but it's really transitioning over now, and the Iraqis are taking over. The only problem is they make the government in Baghdad, which is primarily Shia, kind of nervous. So the government in Baghdad has decided it needs to fire essentially all of the Sons of Iraq. There are about 10,000 of these Sons of Iraq people in Diyala Province. About 20% of them will be put over to the Iraqi security forces, the Iraqi police or the Iraqi army. As for the rest, the government says that it's going to find jobs for them, but unfortunately it really doesn't have the money to do so right now. So that leaves about 80% of these people unemployed. It's pretty tough because unemployment in Diyala Province is running at about 60% in many places. So you have these guys who essentially have guns without a job. It's sort of a bad situation. It's made even worse because there's recently been an uptick of violence. Now, no one really knows what's going on with that, but more attacks have been happening. It could be related to the recent elections, or then again, it could be related to the fact that all these Sons of Iraq guys are essentially getting fired.
Crazy mood. Silly mood.
The Diyala River runs north-south through the Diyala Province, including through Bakaba City, and all along the river are these palm groves. Well, when al-Qaeda was in charge of this area, pretty much undisputed, then they put a bunch of weapons caches in many of these palm groves. And then they set all these booby traps as well, so no one could go in. Well, now al-Qaeda's been reduced in the southern part of Diyala Province, and now the security forces want to go in and get rid of these weapons caches.
Well, around here we just found a lot of HME, homemade explosives, some recoilless rifle rounds, a few other mortar, artillery rounds, things of that nature. The village of Baya, which is just north of these palm groves that we're working in, was a major AQI stronghold. The insurgents came in, kicked out the local villagers, and they made their own residence and safe houses essentially within those villages. And they used these palm groves to hide the caches of munitions that they were using to place IEDs and their weapons. And with the way the river ran, the river covers 3 sides of this particular palm grove section. So it's real easy. They cross the river, come in here, pick up their stuff from the caches, and then just move out into wherever they want to place the IEDs.
Is the situation that if al-Qaeda placed all these caches or munitions here, are they still here?
There are some current al-Qaeda cells, and they're incredibly difficult to pin down because they operate in such small numbers. And they use places like this with heavy IED defensive belts around it and great cover from the air. So they're hard to pin down. Their numbers are incredibly smaller than they were a year ago. The populace has turned against them, in essence, across my entire area of operations. So they are hiding for the most part. They don't have the freedom to operate that they did in the past.
Why are these palm groves important?
It's the economic importance that it holds for the villagers that were kicked out of their village earlier. So this is their livelihood. These are their crops, and that's the main reason.
When you're doing this, why burn this place out? What's the point?
Well, the point of burning is two reasons really. One, the underbrush is so thick and so dense that it's going to have to get burned anyway from the locals. The reeds and the tall grasses kind of crowd out the trees and kill them. So they're going to have to, like I said, be burned out anyway. And the second reason, the most important for the clearing operation, is that it's too difficult to find booby traps and things like that with the level of undergrowth that's there currently. If we can't find them, we can't clear them. If we can't clear them, the people can't return to their land. What they're coming back to, above and beyond everything, is their land, the stuff that we're standing in right now. This, like I said before, is incredibly economically important to them. The main reason for them to return. So, the sheikh that's in the village of Bayat was willing to return, willing to live in tents, regardless of how destroyed his village was, as long as he can get back to his land. So they're going to have initially a hard go, but they're going to make the best of it, and they're very motivated to get back to their land, their homes, just like you and me would.
So what the security forces do now is that instead of going in there, they actually set up these fuel drums all along the edge of the palm grove. And inside the drum are this sort of like jellied fuel. Well, the soldiers set this stuff up and then set well back, and then they set these fuel drums off. And this fuel goes about 100 feet inside of the palm grove and burns really, really intensely for about 2 or 3 minutes. It's really good in terms of like setting off all of the booby traps, but it doesn't actually hurt the palm trees because it doesn't last for very long. So after 2 or 3 minutes, all the undergrowth is gone, all the weapons caches are either blown up or they're now able to be found, and all the booby traps have essentially popped off, and they're no longer a problem. On another day, I went with a group of soldiers to visit a town named Mamel. It's a much more built-up area than most of Diyala Province. It's pretty urban there. In fact, it's pretty close to Baghdad. It's sort of like one of its northern suburbs. What's interesting about Mamel is that there's really been almost no American presence there for the last few years. Today they're in town just to walk around and visit some sheikhs and also just do a regular presence patrol, showing the locals that they're interested and they're there.
I didn't get your names. I'm Lieutenant Troy, by the way.
يعرف معنا نفسه هو اسمه ملازم تروي.
Siad Biggie.
What are you guys doing in this alley, in this village in Iraq here today?
Well, we're getting opinions of the area. We're finding out what things could be fixed, security. I mean, pretty much the safety of everybody, well-being. That's important for us, and then how we can help. The area itself it's kind of a neutral zone. I mean, it's an in-between. It's an in-between area. It's indifferent. We don't have a lot of ISF here or presence of. I mean, we're trying to show our support. Obviously, Iraq as a whole is standing up. It's just there are some certain areas that need more attention than others, and this happens to be one of those areas.
How many times have you been over here, and how's it different or the same from the last time or 2 times?
Well, this is my second tour here. My last tour was during the actual setting of the government, the Iraqi government. So, as far as the progress, it's like a dramatic night and day difference versus before when I was here. Everybody is more focused on training the ISF and the Iraqi army, and that was. I mean, that in itself was a challenge, but now coming here in the transgression, it's the violence has subsided, which is good, which means that, we're slowly rounding up all the last little bit of resistance and making Iraq better as a whole, so it's good. The end state, I mean, we've accomplished our goals. I tell my soldiers that if we don't have to fire a round in defense, then that means that we've accomplished our mission. So it's good, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, so that's awesome. You get to come home feeling like you did something, you accomplished something. Not only that, but you're a part of history. That's it. I tell my soldiers that, believe it or not, 20 years from now, your name may not be in the history books, but your efforts will be.
If you have comments or questions about C-SPAN's international programming, please email us at international@cspan.org. And you can watch this or other C-SPAN programming on Iraq by visiting our website. Just type the word Iraq into the search box in the upper right-hand corner of our homepage. That's at cspan.org.